Today's lecture will be dedicated to Roberto Gerhard, a great Catalan composer. We think that focusing on his work will allow us to discuss several aspects related to our repertoire. I started researching this composer a few years ago, and 2 years ago I also released an album with his solo works. This research led me to discover more about his music, and in particular looking at his manuscript and analyzing the composition that he wrote, also for other instruments. With my colleague Marta Dozzadelli, we are now continuing this research, trying to unveil more about the contribution of Gerhard. This lecture will be divided in 2 parts. The first one is given by Marta, dedicated to Gerhard's bibliography and his compositional approach to some orchestral and some ballet music. And the second part will be dedicated to the guitar music. In particular, I will focus on the genesis of one of his masterpieces, that is the Fantasia, written by in 1957, and another composition written for a television program, For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's now start with some biographical highlights about Gerhard. He was born in Valls, in the region of Tarragona, at the end of the 19th century, to an expatriate family. A Swiss father, a wine merchant, and a French Alsatian mother. I guess his father's will, he dropped out of School of Commerce in Switzerland and decided to pursue his real passion, which was music, and started studying piano in 1915 in Barcelona with Granados, and a year later also composition with Felipe Derel from 1916 to 1922. Gerhard was immersed at the time in a really vibrant cultural scene where Catalan and Spanish folk music and the guitar played a pivotal role. Gerhard, in fact, was both a composer and a famous musicologist who conducted several researches, both on Hispanic polyphony and folk music. This may have well excited Gerhard's interest in plucking instruments repertoire. As we can learn from Perry, it's possible to trace back to 1922 signs of an acquaintance between Gerhard and 2 of the leading guitarists of the time, Regino Sáenz de la Maza and Ángel Barrios. Gerhard was also in friendly terms with the poet Federico García Lorca and the composer Manuel de Falla, who was organizing the Concurso de Cantejondo in 1922, where Gerhard could have met Andrés Segovia, who was in the jury. From 1923 to 1928, Gerhard studied first in Wien and then in Berlin. This period marked a renewal in his poetry, because at that time, Wien and the whole Europe were at the forefront of the scientific and artistic revolution. I think, for example, of Einstein, Planck, and in fine arts, Picasso, Braque, Kandinsky. So, feeling the urge of a more advanced musical education, he decided to study with Arnold Schoenberg, becoming familiar with filial techniques. It's worth noting that in 1924, the famous Catalan guitarist Llobet visited the city and performed there, probably invited by Schoenberg himself. But it's not clear whether Gerhard attended this particular event. During Gerhard's stay in Wien and Berlin, Spain experienced a really tough political dictatorship, which came to an end in 1929, when Gerhard returned to his own country. After a transitional period, then the Republic was proclaimed in 1931. And just a year later, Catalonia obtained the Statute of Autonomy. So Gerhard found himself actively involved in the cultural life of Catalonia, working in the field of composition, musicology, and also civic responsibility. During that period, Catalonian artists aimed to preserve their regional identity, renewing also awareness of their cultural heritage. Gerhard himself took part in two contrasting artistic groups. On the one hand, the CIC, the Catalan Independent Composers, was kind of a more conservative group, and on the other hand, the innovative group ADLAN, which included among its members famous artists such as Salvador Dalí and Juan Miró. As a result, Gerhard in this period turned to Catalan folk music, folklore, following this path traced by Bartók, composing Albada Interlude Danza in 1937. In 1936, Spanish Civil War broke out, and any hopes of artistic expression faded away. So finally, after the occupation of Barcelona in 1939, Gerhard fled the country and moved first to France for a short period, and then to Cambridge, where he had been offered a position at the King's College. Here we can find a significant quotation by the nephew of Gerhard, Ferran, to prove how the composer was actively involved in the political life of Catalonia, being a fierce opponent of the Francoist dictatorship. So we can understand that he was extremely worried for his family and his own life. Let's move on to Cambridge and the UK. In fact, in this period, there was a widespread interest for Spanish music in the UK, witnessed by a number of radio programs dedicated to this topic. As we learned from BBC websites, in 1954, Gerhard presented a program entitled The Heritage of Spain, a survey of Spanish music. It was a 22-episode radio program dedicated to Spanish music from 13th to 19th century. And here we can find a sample of an episode dedicated to the evolution of Spanish guitar, featuring Graziano and Renata Tarrago, performing on period instruments on 17th century and 18th century guitars. It's worth noting that the Tarragos took part in several episodes of this radio program, performing on various plucking instruments such as lutes, lyres, harps, and guitars. Another sign of the interest for the guitar by the BBC is the broadcast of Spanish music by Mudar and Sol, performed by Segovia during the interval of a comedy entitled Celestina, which was set to music by Gerhard. Let's now discuss how this style influenced Gerhard's music through two very insightful contributions by White and Rosier. First, White provides us with a deep insight into Gerhard's recourse both to Catalan and Spanish music, linking it to the traumatic experience of the exile. His theory differs from the most common belief that he made it for a living and just to obtain commissions in a foreign country such as UK, which had labeled him as the Spanish composer. White mentions two fundamental topics. On the one hand, ignorancia, which is a nostalgic longing for Catalonia in the musical form of the lament. Early example of lamento topic can be found in Adagio from Gerhard's ballet Ariel. Here we can find five key features of the lamento, which are slow tempo, minor key, quotation of Catalan folk tunes, the lamento motive characterized by an ascending minor third followed by the descending semitone, and bittersweet major minor third. Now we'll listen to a short extract from Ariel. Another distinctive feature is Españolismo, which is a cliched representation of Spain in the form of Spanish dances. Another example could be traced in Suite pour un instrument de vent, corda e piano, which could be considered as a sort of homage to two of the most significant teachers in Gerhard's life. Schoenberg, in fact, the suite recalls Suite Opus 29 by Schoenberg himself. It's a sort of ironic parody of this composition. And the fact that Gerhard wrote some folk songs containing Pedrer's Cancionero Musical Popular Español is a clear homage to his first Catalan teacher. Here below we can find some features of Españolismo, which are Spanish dance rhythms, bristle triple meter, hemiola rhythms and cross accents, and simulated guitar techniques such as punteado and rasgueado. Again, we listen to a very short extract. Now let's move on with a very short reference to the contribution of Desrosiers, whose study highlights how Gerhard incorporated Catalan material in his ballet Don Quixote in Pandora as a means of alluding to the tragical political situation of this country, and as a way of celebrating the moral superiority of this country, as opposed to the Francoist dictatorship. Catalan folk tunes, for example, are frequently associated with imaginary situations or the embodiment of an ideal, such as Dulcinea or the embodiment of youth in Pandora. Now, Marco will talk to you about the guitar work, Fantasia. Thank you.
Thanks, Marta. So as we saw, the Spanish Civil War constitutes a very tough and dramatic chapter of Gerhard's life. The personal connection with this tragic event was perhaps the reason why the BBC commissioned to Gerhard two incidental music, one for the television, one for the radio, of two adaptations of two important books set during the Spanish Civil War. In both compositions, Gerhard decided to include the guitar, an instrument widely associated with the Spanish and Catalan culture. It is for us evident that also in his guitar music we can retrace the same topics and the same approach that he used for the other compositions. In particular, the approach is very similar to the work that he composed for other instruments during the exile. The first incidental music was composed in 1957 for a radio program dedicated to the book The Revenge for Love by William Lewis. Gerhard decided to include the guitar in combination with three violins, a viola, cello, double bass, percussion, and harp. The Revenge for Love is actually the second composition with the guitar. The first one is a cycle for voice and guitar entitled Cantares, written 1 year before in 1956, for the duo Julian Bream and the soprano with Sophie. Actually, we know that from some letters in the Gerhard archive that there was the soprano with Sophie to commission this piece to Gerhard. So, The Revenge for Love is, I think, quite important work for us as guitarists. And I think a great discovery, because from the material written for this incidental music, Gerhard elaborated the same year his only solo work for guitar, entitled Fantasia, 1957. Actually, we can see that, for example, here the Revenge for Love, and the cue number 2 for Revenge for Love is actually almost the beginning of Fantasia, until I think it here is very similar. We can see also the guitar part where, as you can see, there is an indication of notturno. Okay, but there is also in the guitar part a very nice message addressed to Julian Bream. So here you can read the message, and from this page we can, we know that there was Julian Bream, the guitarist that collaborated with him for this composition. So, as I told you, in August of the same year, Gerhard developed the first version for a solo guitar, most probably under the request of Julian Bream. And the manuscript of the first version of this piece is preserved in the Gerhard archive in Cambridge. I was really surprised to find out that the manuscript of the Fantasia is very different from the printed version. We can say that the printed version is not a simple revision of the manuscript, but more a new version of the composition. It seems that the composer decided, for some reason, to rethink the whole piece. So the beginning, as I told you, is quite similar. There are some differences, but the character and the style is very similar. The main differences are in the central section of this piece. And this actually the style, the language, and the concept of the central section is completely different. In the manuscript, this section is clearly inspired by flamenco music. It contains arpeggio and repeated chords, always in A major. And in the published version, we have a more dissonant section with the use of polytonality and a more complex harmony. We have to say that both versions, Gerhard in both versions used elements from the incidental music. So, for example, this central section. In this central section, Gerhard elaborate material composed in the cue number 9 for the incidental music. As you can see, the tempo is different, but the harmonic material is the same. So it's just a material that he didn't elaborate in the first version of the piece. Here in this picture, you can see also how the piece evolved. We can see, for example, the first bar of the piece, how changed during the, let's see if I can zoom. So here you can see Education Nocturno is quite fast. And for example, let's focus on the first bar. We have the chord all together. In the first manuscript, we have the indication is different. Andante con malinconia is softer. Then we have the C sharp and the chord that are separate, and we have a mezzo forte. And then we have the final version with more details. We have forte, vibrato, andante, and then we have the rest of one quiver. Okay, now maybe we can talk a little bit about the collaboration with Julia Bream, or better, what we think happened. Our idea is that Julian Bream discarded the first version of the solo work because the language was too folkloristic, and we have quite a few cues about to say that. And after that, Gerhard redesigned the composition by using a more complex and contemporary style. As we saw in the last three lectures, in particular the one by Fabio Zanon and Steve Goss, Julian Bream was trying to create a new repertoire that was not associated with the folkloric Spanish music. And an hypothetical disagreement could also explain why the composer decided to publish the piece only a few years later, and without dedication and fingering. In the book Gerhard on Music, Marion Bowen wrote that Julian Bream premiered the piece in 1957. We were not able to discover if the premiere actually took place and which edition he used. But we are inclined to believe that Julian Bream did not play the piece on that occasion. He rejected the first version and he didn't play the piece. We believe that it was John Williams to premiere the new version of the piece, most probably in November 1958 in Cambridge. By the way, Julian Bream recorded this piece, but in 1984, so long after the author's death. His recording greatly helped the diffusion of the music, and we have to take his interpretation to the diffusion of this music. For the rest of Gerhard's life, the composer worked mostly with John Williams. In 1965, Gerhard was asked to compose the incidental music for a television series, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and John Williams recorded that. The series consisted of 4 episodes dedicated to the Ernest Hemingway's masterpiece. The book, set during the Spanish Civil War, tells the story of Robert Jordan, a young American that joins the Republican guerrilla unit. And Robert's mission is to blow up a bridge, centering the strategy of the resistance against the Francoist army. 2 years ago, I did an arrangement of this piece. The arrangement is my reorganization of Gerhard's material that is divided in a few fragments. And I reorganized those fragments to create a concert piece that can stand the execution without text. Unfortunately, the script and the TV series are lost. I have to say that in 2006, already the Spanish editor Chuto published an arrangement of the work, and also an article with the fragments and a very detailed critical commentary. The edition was created by Eugenio Tobalin, and the performance arrangement was made by Marion Bowen. The arrangement of Bowen is very different from mine, and is shorter, as it lasts 8 minutes in the version of Bowen, and almost 18 minutes in my arrangement. But what differed the most is the approach to the arrangement. And I think that we can discuss a little bit because we can, from this experience of rearranging For Whom the Bell Tolls, I discover a lot of aspects of Gerhard music that we can apply also in Fantasia. So I think that Gerhard did not conceive the music merely as a background complement to the television series, but rather as a way of reflecting on the Spanish Civil War. Gerhard used symbolic musical elements, quotations, and recurrent motifs to represent the plot of the book and to reflect upon the main themes emerging from it: love, war, and death. It is remarkable to note that his compositional approach to this work is very similar to the one he used in his ballets Don Quixote and Pandora, where, as we saw before, a complex use of the musical material are used to create references to the political situation of his country. In this case, as in the two ballets, the links were not meant to be perceived easily by the British public. Nevertheless, they remain a crucial element of this composition. And for me, unveiling their meaning was essential to deeply understand the work and to develop my constant arrangement of the composition. Now, to reconnect to Marta's presentation, I would like to play for you two examples of elements connected with the Catalan folklore and the Spanish culture. So let's start with this folk song. Actually, Gerhard here used a lullaby that he already used in the song cycle Cantares. And here he used that to depict the love of Jordan and Maria. And usually during the Spanish Civil War, the two lovers, they had quiet moment only in the night where Jordan tried to help sleep Maria. This one is what is in the book, and here he used this lovely lullaby. It's also quite interesting that the title of the Cantares is Un galán y su morena, and I used the same title for this movement. I will play for you a passage that show a Spanish element. In my interpretation of this work, I lend great importance of two musical elements that can help us to understand his way of composing. I identified the two elements as the theme of the bridge that appears 3 times during the composition and the theme of the death. The theme of the bridge appears each time with some variation and always connected with the plot. The first time the motif ends on a suspended chord. The second time it develops into a virtuosity gesture and ending with the A major chord. So the first time is when he firstly went to see the bridge and is full of doubts about the mission. And the second time is when he visited the bridge together with some members of the guerrilla unit and is very self-confident of the success of the mission. So maybe let's listen just the first appearance of this theme. He used the same material then in another piece, a few years later, the composition Liber.
So the theme of the bridge reappear also at the end of the composition. And the last time he used this material to portray the explosion of the bridge. The theme of the bridge reappear, but it gradually become more and more dissonant until the final explosion of the bridge, represented by 3 chord in fortissimo. Later we will see better. But the book's ending is very strong. We have the explosion of the bridge, but we have also the death of the protagonist. So that is quite important for, in some way, for the meaning of the book. So we have the winning of this mission, they accomplish the mission, but there is also the loss of the protagonist. So there is another theme that is the theme of the death, that is an echo of the Homenake pour le tombeau de Claude Debussy by Manuel de Falla, and is based on the melodic cell E and F. So here is the first appearance of this theme. Okay. This theme, the last note, appears again after the explosion of the bridge. And you see we have E, F, piano, diminuendo. So the music, like the book, leaves the listener with a sense of despair and sadness. In the book, for the death of the main character, and the music with the contrast between the two elements. And also the fact that when we have EF, we have a sense of a need for a resolution that will not appear. So this ending invites the audience to ponder the ever-present horror of the war. And here is where my arrangement deeper differ from the other publisher arrangement of this work. Woven arrangement ends with the very virtuosistic passage in A major. The second appears of the theme of the bridge. From a compositional point of view, this fragment provides a perfect conclusion for the composition, being very Spanish, virtuosistic, and it ends on A major. So we have a great sense of conclusion. However, according to our hypothesis, it clearly contradicts the composer's approach to the composition. For Whom the Bell Tolls, as Fantasia and the other works that the composer wrote in particularly during the exile, are not nationalistic pieces. The gestures taken from the Spanish tradition used by Gerhard do not express national pride as much as they did for other composers of the time. For example, let's think about Rodrigo. But they always hide symbolic meanings. Looking at his guitar music, we see that on the one hand, how the musical elements are connected to the Spanish folklore and balanced with elements of the Catalan tradition, and on the other hand, how the Spanish elements are distorted and modified during the composition. Now, okay, maybe I can play for you just the ending of this composition to give you the sense of the feeling of this ending. I think that now we can look also at Fantasia in a fresher way, and we try to understand, to give an hypothesis of the underlying meaning of the piece. So, in my interpretation, I think that the beginning is referring to the a culture and culture element. Let's see, we have element like melody. Also, as we saw in the manuscript, we have andante con melanconico, con melancolia. Let's play this one. The central section, we have a representation of the world with the use of polytonality. It's very dissonant, and there is a huge crescendo during this section. Let's play just the beginning. And then at the end we have again the lament-like section, and then we have again the tempo vivace, just a few bars with again the same material of used in the central section, and then we have a suspended chord and then the A major. This A major is fortissimo, staccato, non arpeggiato, and this A major is not a nice chord. It's a more tense chord, and I have to say that in this composition has a sort of unpleasant sound. He's using in almost percussive and with a sound with a lot of energy, and is not an happy ending, and is an ending full of tension. And for me, this last chord express the winning of the Franco side, so the winning of the regime. So we have again the element of the war, and then this ending. And it's quite important to have this in mind in my interpretation, because to give the good feeling to this A major that is not relaxed. So thank you so much. Here we have our bibliography. And if you want, we can send also the file for you, and all the audio from my album Gerhard and Monpont. So thank you so much.
Are we back?
Yes.
Thanks very much, Marco and Marta. Does anybody have any questions they want to send to the chat at this stage?
Okay, Jose, I will send you the file later, the bibliography.
Perhaps while people are thinking, just in relation to you talk about the edition that he sent of Fantasia to Julian Bream, and then the section that he changed to being more chromatic and more tense, which you're saying sort of represents the war, or the War of Independence. Does that suggest? So did Gerhard sanitize his music? Did he sort of while in the UK, err towards composing music that was more Spanish in a nice way, because you know the word you used, the Hispanismo, and sort of maybe hold back on the stuff that was maybe slightly darker for his career. Or
I think that he was doing a mix of the two. So, for example, one of the first ballet. So we talk about Don Quixote and Pandora, but he wrote also one piece that is flamenco. That is the one that is more inspired by flamenco. But for that piece, Gerhard wrote that the use of the music was a request of the contract. So in UK, there was this need of Spanish music in that moment. But also in that piece that is inspired by flamenco, is using a lot of elements in a more ironic way, or always with a sort of trying to criticize a little bit also the cliche. And there are a lot of quotation of him, criticizing the use of Spanish cliche in music that at the time was very common. In the case of Fantasia, the first version, the center section is very Spanish, but the structure of the piece is completely different. So in the published version is slow, and a Catalan element. Central section in the published is the war with the polytonality, and then we have Catalan, and then the winning of the war, the winning of the Franco side, so the A major. In the manuscript, we have the central section in A major, but the ending is ending only with the nostalgic element. Actually, it's ending with two notes, very soft. So it was always trying to balance. And the two versions are like, I don't know if Marta wants to add something to that.
Yeah.
No, you depicted very, very well this kind of contraposition between these two elements, and the difference between the two editions, so the manuscript and your work. I think you made a great job.
Michael, we want to.
Hi, Marco.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a million. That's great. I didn't know much about Gerhard's music until today, and it sounds like brilliant music. So thanks a million, and well done to both of you. I'm just wondering. I was curious about you were talking about the hair. I was wondering, do you think Gerhard's music development of Spanish music and Spanish guitar in the UK? I read an essay, big long essay once by a guy called Miguel Mera. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but he was talking about the way when British people started to holiday more in Spain in the 70s and 80s, that it increased their desire to hear Spanish culture and Spanish heritage and Spanish music as a result. And that, he in his mind, he was linking the rise of Julian Bream and John Williams on elements like that. But I was just wondering, maybe Gerhard's presence, especially with such an audience, that maybe that really would have helped as well, you think?
Marta, you want to?
So we talked about his experience of exile. So I think he wanted to avoid this kind of cliched to be labeled as a Spanish composer. But so yeah, I think that his role is quite in that direction. I really don't know. Yes, maybe he wanted to publicize in a way to his Spanish music, but not as such, just as a pleasure music, Japan repertoire is so deeply linked to his experience that but I don't know if I answered your question because it's quite complex.
Maybe I can add.
Marco can help.
I think that one thing that we can see is that, in particular, in the 40s and the 50s, he was working a lot with BBC. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, he was working a lot with BBC, and he was doing, for example, the series of programs dedicated to Spanish music, and in some way he was playing. So it helps a lot the diffusion of Spanish music, in particular inside the BBC. That for sure. But he was playing a little bit because it was the request of the public was to cliché music, okay, and he was giving cliché music, but the process behind the composition of the music was very sophisticated, very clever. So he was trying to hide the messages. So the reason why I'm talking about that is, is giving some flamenco or some nationalistic pieces, but always with a sort of hide criticism to the regime.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marco.
Maybe.
I think there's a question from Carlos, is there?
Hello there. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Marco. It's really great to discover this work, because it's very well kind of unknown in the repertoire, and really is a very nice piece to hear. And as I see to play is also maybe a lot of fun. I think this Fantasia. I wanted to ask Marco more about the arrangement process. How did you make some decisions within the original version of the manuscript and the 2 or 3 different versions you mentioned during the lecture? And because I think it's not much works that has this kind of social and political content, then that arrangement would be also like having an implication for the meaning of the work, because I don't know if ending in an E major chord would be for Gerhard and his philosophy in living in exile, a victim of this regime of Franco, of that really would be his idea, or I don't know. I was a little not disturbed, but a little confused, I would think.
Yes. So for the Fantasia, I used almost the published version, because I think at the end of the process, he was happy of that. For whom the bell tolls, actually, I love Gerhard music. So when in 2006 they published For Whom the Bell Tolls, the first things I bought the score, and I started to read that. And I was very disappointed because the performance arrangement, it was strange. It was the arrangement of Bourbon is a very Spanish piece, full of cliché. And before that, I read a letter of Gerhard to one of his students, where he was very happy of this piece. He was saying, "I'm composing this piece for solo guitar, and I think that it will be a success." And then I read a very simple piece with a major chord, and there was something missing. So then what I did is I looked the fragment, so the manuscript, and then I did one thing. I read the book, and I tried to understand what he was doing. So it's full of quotation of previous work. For example, here I played the lullaby that he already used in Cantares. For example, there the title of the Cantares helped me to understand in which part of the book he was referring. and it was like a research on finding some cues that helped me to understand what he was doing. There are a lot of things like that. The theme of for example, the first time at the beginning of the book, there is this moment where one gypsy woman read the hand of the protagonist and foreseen his death. And at the beginning of the composition, there is this moment where there is this repetition of E and F with a very gypsy feeling in the composition, and I related it to that section. So, like, that seems quite complex. Then at the end, after discovering that, I just had to connect the fragment. I didn't change so much also the order. So the difficult part was to understand, to have an hypothesis of the meaning of those fragments. Obviously, is my interpretation of the work. The approach of the other arranger was to create a piece for concert. So he took the fragments that looked more complete and looked more Spanish, and they can work in concert, and he create a nice piece, a nice suite, Spanish suite. That maybe is not what Gerhard wanted to do. He wanted to create something that has an underlying meaning. Not all the composers work like that, but Gerhard seems that he was very passionate on that, to try to make the music with a meaning.
But this middle part that you said that is representing the war,
yes,
that you showed the original manuscript with practically rasgados maybe, and very full chords, and the Bream version with this very thin A and D basses and a little more, like more little chords, or not that heavy. I don't know. You tried also the version with the full chords, or wasn't?
Yes. But I think that the thing is that the second version, the published version, that we don't know if Bream. I don't know if Bream was the reason of the change. Was actually proposing something or not? But that element is already present in the soundtrack that he originally worked on. So I think that what mainly he changed is the story of the piece. So in the first version, there was this A major, and then the ending with a very soft and nostalgic section. And then he decided to change it. I'm quite sure that I have a few. I didn't put because I just people told me that they spoke with Bream, and he said that he didn't like the first version of this piece. And it's quite, for me, it's quite clear. You see, it's a piece where you have one page of A major, or you shift the chord and you do a arpeggio, and at the time Bream was trying to do something, to have something else. And Gerhard, he was composing also music for BBC, but he was he was a student of Schoenberg. So he tried to have from him a substantial piece that, as it is now, the Fantasia. So I think that we don't have a lot of pieces that have that language, of that time and of this level.
Thank you, very nice. I think it's really, really representative piece. I think it's really a nice work. Should we be more played, I think.
No, I think so. It would be nice to ask to John Williams or to ask to Julian Bream the story. That I didn't manage yet to be able to do that. But I remember actually. I don't know if Laura is here today, but I remember when I went to listen her concert at the Wigmore Hall with for the Julian Bream Trust. She played Fantasia. And I remember that before the concert, Julian Bream talked with Julian Anderson about Fantasia, but unfortunately, I didn't record, and at the time I was not so keen. So maybe I will write to Laura also to know if she knows something more.
And I think it's also fascinating to see which kind of friendship did Roberto Gerhard had, because there was quite a lot of very cultivated and illustrated friends, a lot of incredible composers, the best painters in Spain, the best of the best, the creme de la creme. I think is should be taken seriously, because it's somebody who was really cultivated and had a very high cultural level, maybe, no?
Yes. Okay, I recorded this album of Monpou and Gerhard, and I decided to use that because they have two different styles. And then I discovered that they were close friends. And actually, it was Gerhard that he tried a few times to create a group of composers in Barcelona and with also Monpou, but it was also helping him without letting know to other people. He was one of the first to send Monpou music to De Faglia, for example, or he was trying desperately to organize concerts for Monpou when he was not so famous, and always Monpou that he was very shy, was saying, "Oh, thanks, but maybe next year." And yes, it was someone that I think that gave a lot of importance to the friendship. Once wrote to Monpou that, for example, their friendship was perfect because they were completely different. So Monpou very shy, and the music is very reflective with not a lot of tension, and his music is full of tension, particularly his orchestral music.
Does anybody have any other questions? And did that change throughout his career, Marco and Martha, that dynamic he had where he's sort of hiding some of these more tense aspects, and he's sort of, like you say, Marco, he's sort of putting them behind like these sort of systems? Did that change as he got older, or did he talk more about the Civil War, or did that become less sort of hidden?
I think go, Martha.
No, as we said, we can find examples of ignorancia and españolismo in 1930s. So I think that it's a sort of stylistic characteristics of his music. Yeah, I don't think that how can I say? It's something that has always been present in his music, as far as I'm concerned. Yes, as White demonstrates, distinguishing between ignorancia and españolismo, and then also in his ballads in 1940s with his use of Catalan and Spanish elements. I think that, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Marco maybe can add something.
No, yes. For example, the approach that he used for Whom's the Best Horse, that is 65, is very similar to the one of Pandora, that is before. But in general, it's funny that he didn't wrote a lot about that. So it's more he was hiding messages, and he didn't pretend to the audience to understand the quotation or to. It was, I think that it was his way of dealing with the tragic event of his life. It was his way of
rebelling.
going through it. Yes.
Thanks very much. Do we have any more questions, or one last question from anybody? Or I think in that case, Marco and Martha, will we finish up?
Okay. Thanks so much. Maybe we can, I would like to remind you that next week we have GFA with a very nice conference. I don't know if Steve is here. Maybe he can say something.
I think he is he?
More. But you can look at GFA website, and there is one very nice lecture I saw. Hi.
Thanks, Steve. You know,
Steve.
Hi.
Do you want us to
Yeah,
say something about the conference next week?
No, just only very briefly. I can just send a link with the full program on, which people might find useful.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just do that. I'll put it in the notes here. Although, will they disappear when the thing closes?
They will
I'll
disappear.
send them to you, Marco, and you can
Yes,
save it.
And I added also the link to the GFA schedule also in the email with the Zoom link
Yeah, I saw that.
for this.
okay, fine.
So you can find it.
there's,
I think it is.
Yeah, there's plenty going on next week, that's for sure. Yeah, quite a few interesting things to tune into. A lot of the lectures should be very interesting. Jonathan Leithwood's now kind of taken over the whole kind of research side of the GFA, so yeah, just check it all out. There's some really good stuff. And the kind of main research day is the 24th, which is next Wednesday. Yeah.
Great. So we will meet again next week in some way.
Yeah, not too late.
The GFA. Okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Right.